hopefully. And we know that today also marks the birth of the Organization of African Unity, and the African Unity Day has been set aside for the various citizenry on the continent to be in a position, as always, to remember what the day means for the continent and ensure we have a united front as far as we're concerned. Well, it is observed as a public holiday in Ghana, Mali, Namibia, Zimbabwe, and also Zambia. However, celebrations are held in many of the continent's nations as well as by Africans in the diaspora. And we've been doing that for a long time. The significance of the day is still up for debate, but also about the significance of the organization AU itself in the livelihoods and also the economies of the continent. How significant is the AU?
African Union, AU. It is very significant. I will not, if you take the union, and I'm sure we all started reading about this union for a very long time.
Very.
I think from JHS you start reading about the African Union. It was Organization of African Unity, OAU. Now they changed the name and made it AU, African Union. The dreamers, the brainchild, those who decided to come together to bring African under this one umbrella. I think it's a very good idea. It's a very brilliant idea that, look, let's come together. And if you read about the aims and objectives, you see that they are positive-minded. It is about making sure that the ordinary man is given some kind of relief in Africa, where we'll create a very big market. You can move in, move out, go everywhere as an African. And I think if you have a large pool, it enables you to do a lot of things. And for that matter, I think it's significant in that regard. But if you talk about currently, have we been able to achieve the aims and objectives of this union? To some extent, some will argue yes, some will also think no. But I think if you want to rate it in percentage-wise, I think we are still far, far behind. Far
now,
behind.
to the point where you make comparisons with countries in Asia, or even a lot more of those countries in the Caribbean, even, where travel times are shorter and the fares are not as huge as we have in Africa. We still have movement of goods and services, a very difficult thing. And we're not united as country to country. We still have disagreements even across borders. You can even take Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, for example. You have Eritrea, Ethiopia. You have Al-Shabaab in Somalia and the rest of the Horn of Africa, disturbing countries in East Africa. You also have Boko Haram, etc. What do you think the leaders should be thinking about, or should always be thinking about, when it comes to some of these instabilities and perhaps inadequacies of movement of people, etc.?
Yes, I think, like I was saying, if you want to rate it, we are still far, 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 far behind. And you catalog a lot of the misfortunes that we experience in Africa. What leadership must be doing? You see, we are all poor. Leadership everywhere is not clicking. If somebody will tell you that, look, Ghana under Nkrumah is better off than Ghana under JDM because he's the current president. That's why I'm saying that. Somebody will tell you that those days, Nkrumah's leadership was better off than JDM's leadership today. So which means that we are retrogressing instead of progressing. Okay, so what our leaders need to do, one is to first of all think that, look, we are not leading ourselves. We are not leading our families. Okay, we are leading the entire nation.
Okay. We have on the line international relations experts and also with the Lagos Center for International Affairs and Diplomacy. And Dr. Vladimir Ntwidanso is on the line. A very good morning to you, Prof.
Good morning, and good morning to your listeners.
Okay, sir. Now, significantly, I know this has been a subject that has been discussed for decades about the relevance of the AU. Do you think that we still need to be talking about how relevant it is, but really going on towards the actionables about how to strengthen it, etc.?
The basic issue is that we need to stop talking about whether it is relevant or not and accept the fact that it is relevant. It is something we need. It is something we need to work towards and shape it and make it realizable. So for me, that is where the world is going now. This is forcing all groups of countries to form such organizations. And there is no part of the world where these things don't exist. Each country wants to be part of some integrated groups. So it is relevant. As for relevance, we don't have to quarrel about it at all.
Now, to the point where we've had, well, the ASEANs, they've been more successful at what they do, following what the power brokers, so to speak, and the leaders, EU, have been able to do. Why is it that we fail to perhaps look, so to speak, even copy what the EU and the ASEAN countries have been able to do as far as the integration, movement of goods and services, and the unity thereof for their various continents?
Indeed, we are copying the EU tremendously. And it's at times precisely because we try to copy the EU that we have a lot of hiccups. We're going by the traditional classical application of the theory of integration. But the situations are not the same. And therefore, what EU ran through before it was successful and what it is having as problems are not what we are going through. For example, one of the biggest things in our march forward towards integration is the question of bad governance and instability, which you don't have in Europe. In fact, to be a member of the club, you must show that you have good governance in your country, democracy, liberalism. But in our case, it's the question of geography, that because you are an African country, you're already a member. That's the big problem. Secondly, the logic of integration is that it is trade-induced, and therefore the intensity of trade is a sine qua non to integration. How much do we trade amongst ourselves? Infrastructure is one of the things also. How much are we linked infrastructurally and things like that? So we're copying the EU. You don't think that it is because we are not copying. We are copying, and that is why we are falling into several pitfalls rather.
So then I get your point. It's because we're not taking into cognizance the cultural differences and also, well, what is peculiar? What is peculiar?
I would rather call it the specificities of the African continent. We are not taking into cognizance the basic specificities of our continent in our march towards integration.
If, let's say, the EU is able to, well, tell countries like Greece, Portugal, Spain, etc., that you have difficulties in your economy, you need to fix it, of course, we'll give you bailout, etc. But we're not able to do that on the African continent when we have even rulers who would want to go in for a third term, who are causing destabilization in their countries, not governing well, and also being perhaps also opposed by their own people. And the EU not doing what it's supposed to do in terms of tell them what's supposed to be right. How then do we see a forward march to meeting the objectives of the EU in itself?
Exactly what we started this conversation with, that specifically in Africa, we are unable to make the AU the pivotal point where the supranational institutions rule. For example, let me give you an example. Not quite long ago, Tony Blair was very serious with the Chinese to the extent that he wanted a certain kind of relationship. He wanted a certain law against the Chinese influx into UK. And he was very much angry. After Tony Blair had burst out that way, the Commissioner for Foreign Relations of the EU, who incidentally is also a British citizen, got up to castigate Tony Blair and said, no, you have no right to do this. You can't relate to China different from what the EU relates. The EU official foreign policy is X. So, Tony Blair, you are not right. Can we do that in Africa? We cannot. Because the supranational institutions are not the ones who are ruling. Individual countries still hold on to their individual rules and regulations and things like that. So this is the case. We have not reached a point where the supranational organs are those who are able to make the rules and regulations and therefore try to enforce them. For example, if we say Greece, this is what the Constitution, this is what the European rules and regulations are. Therefore, go this way. If you don't, then we can't. So it's like until we have been able to unite and give the supreme authority to supranational organs, we should forget about trying to fix terms of office, trying to fix this, trying to, make those protocols that should be obeyed by individual countries. They won't obey them. And what do? Instability before we go in.
Well, we tried to do something very good. In 1975, we had ECOWAS formed. We've had the COSAFA region, or so to speak, the SADC region. SADC is there. We've had some other regional groupings or blocks in there. How do we perhaps tend to draw linkages between them so that at least on the economic front we take advantage of what markets there are as the initial step towards a comprehensive integration? Good.
A very interesting question. The point is, since the OAU days, there has been a contestation between continentalism and sub-regionalism. This seems to have been continentalism in the sense of getting one government for Africa, one AU and that kind of thing, and sub-regionalism where you mentioned ECOWAS, SADC and that kind of thing. So the problem seems to have been resolved one way or the other in 1991 when the Abuja Africa Economic Community project was launched. In that AEC project, the OAU decided that we must have building blocks towards African unity. That when you put on block after block, you get a very good wall. And so what they decided was that there should be 5 regional blocks: AMU, Arab Maghreb Union, ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States, ECAS, the Central African Republic, the Central Africa Economic Community of Central African States, then EAC, the East African Economic Community, and then you have SADC, the South African Development Community. So these 5 blocks must be viable blocks. They must be like Europe, like 5 smaller Europes. Then you put them together to get one Africa Economic Community. But since then, many more smaller mushrooming ones have come up, making the African Union look like a spaghetti bowl, as we normally call it in the literature. We have 35 of them on a continent of 54 countries. Can you imagine? Therefore, the AU decided to rationalize them, and now we have 8 of them. Even there, we have overlapping membership, and this is the problem. So the wisdom is to have these blocks viable, then we can have AU.
If we get the regional blocks viable, that will resolve the difficulties that we have regionally, and so lead to the unism we would want in AU.
Exactly.
Is that the logic?
Exactly.
How do we achieve that?
We achieve that by one ECOWAS, with the ECOWAS Commission as the central organ, like the European Commission. You understand? Then SADC. So it will be easier to have 5 currencies on the continent, isn't it?
Sure.
Only 5 currencies. Then, since there are interlinkages, railways, highways, whatever, getting AU as AU is not a difficulty at all. And the analogy I gave is like putting up a wall. Once you lay the block one over the other with cement, I tell you, the wall is a wall.
You make it sound like calculus. You solve this, you put this together, then
it's fabulous.
you get the chemical combinations correct.
Come again?
You make it sound like it's calculus. You just do this and but we know there are realistic physical challenges. There are real border challenges. There are real regional challenges. There are real cultural challenges. Now, so far as we're able to unite West Africa through ECOWAS, and we've been able to make sure, well, we have movement of people, even though there are some significant hindrances, but we're able to pull all that together. How interested should the AU as an organization be when we know that it's the same members in the regional groupings who also need to be taking up the responsibility at the top, the apex of AU, so to speak?
Very interesting. The point is this, that the AU recognizes the difficulties. And it is the same AU that is in contest with the regional bodies. But the regional bodies themselves have their own specific problems. For example, you talk about the border problems. Yes. For Niger, for example, 76% of the revenue come from border tariffs. So while integration demands of an integrating group to lower barriers to trade and facilitate trade rather, you have all these barriers like you are talking about. We will never get there when these barriers are there. But you don't just remove the barriers by removing them sick. You remove the barriers because you trade among yourselves intensively. So if we don't stop that vertical trade, you know, and align ourselves with the horizontal trade among ourselves, then integration has no meaning. Secondly, if there is no infrastructure, integration has no meaning. Thirdly, while removing the borders, you are trying to create a common external tariff so that nobody enters Togo and wanting to come to Ghana, you pay another tariff. So you have one common external tariff, one external border. Beyond that, you go to, you reach yourself into a huge market, a common market, and then a currency follows. If you don't do all these, integration has no meaning. And these are the problems that we are having in trying to get there. In ECOWAS, SADC, everywhere you have this problem. And leaders must set up. They really have to set up. Integration is a must. As I've said, it's a must under globalization. And whilst integration is a must, going there is difficult. And so the political will must be there. A lot of the countries put integration at the back burner. Every country is trying to fix their own initial problems first. Wrong. The more we are united, the easier it is for these countries to be economically viable.
Now, bringing the subject of the economy, we know that we have to explore the local market first, and that's what you've said. There's also alliances internationally, and we know, well, we've had invasions in the past from Europe and the Americas, so to speak. Now, we have strong linkages with China. Why, if we haven't been able to make good use of, well, the relationship we've had with the EU and the United States, how then do we make it more productive with, well, those coming from China, India, and the other subcontinent of the ASEAN region?
I have always said that the Chinese are no different from our European counterparts who ruled us for all those years and exploited us. Why? Because they are only using a different methodology in getting to exploit us. They don't interfere politically. They don't care who rules. They come, you give them the space, they enter the space, and they are no different from our counterparts out there. The main point is that if we were seriously united, ECOWAS, one ECOWAS, China or India or the BRICS, none of them, Brazil or Europe itself, cannot divide us, because we have a situation where if you came to Ghana and the industrial code is so bad, you just move to Sierra Leone. But China can move to Sierra Leone, we are competing with each other instead of collaborating. So for me, the onus lies on us to get united, and nobody can take us for a ride. I tell you, integration is a sine qua non to development. And Lagenhoff and others have said that the future of the world is going to be a future of community. The relationship will be community. Huge America is one, China is one. Then you have NAFTA coming on board. You have ASEAN, you have South Pacific. These are unions that will be related and trading with each other. We are now signing we have signed with Europe on this economic partnership agreement. And it is so individualistic. The point is we say ECOWAS, but I tell you, we are going to compete with each other because what Ghana gets is not what Ivory Coast gets. So instead of uniting us, the EPA is going to really balkanize us the more.
Well, my last question to you. So now that's the thinking. If that's the thinking, why is it that we've known the solution and never been able to implement it so far? It's baffling. The point
is that we are being selfish. There are several hurdles. We are extremely being selfish. Each country is being selfish. And governance is anything but bad. In almost all the communities, governance, look at what's happening in Burundi. So EAC will have to stop and solve that. Look at what happened in West Africa, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast. In every country, democracy is hiccuping badly. But you know, one of the things that integration requires is a kind of democratic dispensation, peace. Not necessarily liberalism, but let's see some kind of, like, if you take Rwanda, what is happening over there does not behave like you are having that kind of liberal, classical kind of democratic dispensation. Eritrea, or Botswana, or Ethiopia. These are the 4 countries in Africa that are rising and rising very well, united and moving steadfastly. If all other countries are joining countries around Ethiopia, do that. If all are joining countries in the East African community, do that like Kagame is doing. Getting one union is not a difficulty. But everywhere else, we have democracy hiccuping extremely badly, bad leadership. If we get our leadership problem right, Africa will be united tomorrow.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Vladimir Ntwi-Danso, international relations expert, as well as a professor of diplomacy, etc., at the Legon Center for International Affairs, and speaking to us. We're very much happy, and thanks for your time this morning. And so he seemed to have said it all. Selfishness is killing us, parochialism, etc. How do we make sure, as even in country, we're able to make sure that we have that sense of unity of purpose?
See, I think Doc, like Bradley said, he's made some valid points. I think that's where I started from, by saying that sometimes it's not about you thinking about leading yourself or your home. You are leading the entire people. And what I've realized is that the difference between we Africans and the Europe, you see, when a society develops, everybody within that society benefits. But when an individual develops, the larger chunk of the society don't develop. And that is what is catching up with us in Africa. Every leader wants to develop himself. Just a small group of people are fighting for their own. They don't think about any other person. Self-centeredness, selfishness. And you know, these are leaders. Within Ghana, we begin thinking that way. Nigeria is thinking the same way. So when you put up all these leaders together, everybody now begins to think about his country in a way. So it's very difficult to develop. So it's easy, like you rightly said, we know all these things. Why are we still where we are today? And it's not easy for somebody to do away with selfishness. But globally, we must begin to change our attitude as Africans. Leaders. You see, everything we talk borders too much on leadership. If our leaders are not doing what is right, if our leaders will not think about the ordinary man on the streets, then forget it. At the end of the day, the idea is fantastic. Look, it is easier today, like we said, to import goods from China than importing it from even Nigeria. Look at where China is. We trade with them very comfortably, but we cannot even trade with Togo comfortably. What is the rationale? But it's just about leadership. So he's an expert. He's an international. So
the leadership on the continent is wrong.
We are not getting it. People are not. People will talk about Nkrumah. People will talk about Nkrumah. People will talk about Nkrumah. But you see, go and look at Nkrumah in person. What has he made for himself? Not too long ago, people, the family of Nkrumah, they don't even have a place to lay their heads. He has not even got a room, a better house. Permit me to use it. But they go and look at the other people. You see, he started thinking about Ghana. So whatever he's doing, let me develop Ghana. So if Ghana is developed, eventually, Nkrumah is developed. But today, our perception is not the same thing. We are thinking about, look, let's develop ourselves. So even if you take rich people within our communities, those people who claim they are rich, go to their villages and see the kind of poverty that is there. But they sit on our televisions, they sit on our radios and brag. Okay, go there. People just want a borehole. A village just want a borehole to survive. They cannot get it.
And they have more than enough.
They have more than enough
to spend.
Look, you enter their houses and the kind of swimming pools that you find. People need just a borehole to drink. They cannot drink. They can't get it. You see?
And talking about that, a former rector of the Ghana Institute of Management Public Administration, GIMPA, Professor Adair, says church leaders must also play an active role in holding leaders accountable to the people, especially, he says, the country's leaders. He says suggestions that religious leaders must stay away from the political space are misled and must be rejected. We'll try and get an insight from him, because he said, well, if the churches always preach to congregants, and the congregants really are those who turn out to become leaders, then why can't you tell them to say, why don't you provide what is good for the people? Why don't you stop siphoning money from state coffers, etc.?
It's a good call. You see, the Bible says when a righteous man leads, his people rejoice.
Amen.
So it's a very good call. Sometimes when people say, Christians, if you're a Christian, don't get yourself into politics. If you're a Christian, don't do politics. Sometimes I just laugh. And I like the question. If you continue to read, he says, look, those we call Christians, they don't live in heaven. We all live here in Ghana. You live in Nigeria. You live in Togo, or whichever country you find yourselves. You don't live any different place. So if you are Christians, you know the right thing, and you allow, let me use religion. If I use Christian, I might be segregating. Let me say religion. Those who are religious. So put both Christianity, whatever people who really know God, people who think that, look, God is there for me to serve God, and for that matter must do the right thing. So if you're a Christian, if you're a Muslim, not just by that name. You see, people go around carrying we are Muslim, we are Christian, but truly, they are not. If you are a very strong Christian and you believe in the Bible, you should be the first person to be doing politics. You should be the first person to be calling for leadership. It should be the first person to be to take the lead and do the right thing. Like I said, when a righteous man lead, the people will rejoice. But if you allow people, permit me to say, anyhow to lead, they will cook the food for you. Whether it's palatable, it's not palatable. You have given them the mandate to cook, and you must consume. So I perfectly agree with him that, look, Christians must hold leadership accountable. Let them do the right thing. If somebody is doing the wrong thing, as a Christian, as a man of God, you need to let the person know that this thing you are doing is not right. You see, there are differences. You see, don't insult the person. See, insults are different from holding somebody accountable. Constructive criticism should be expected from Christian bodies or religious bodies. But if you sit down and you keep quiet that, oh, we are Christians, we don't want to get ourselves involved in politics. Meanwhile, what is politics? Politics is everywhere. Even in church, there's politics. Electing a pastor or elders, that is politics. Even in your home.
Even as to who becomes the head of the financial committee in the church.
Everything, there's politics. So if you neglect, or if you sit down and fold your arms and say, look, we're not going to do the national politics, then I think you are making a mistake. And he made another call by saying that, look, we should not also be voting on tribal issues. No, I am voting for this party because I am this. I am voting for this party because I am this. No, let's look for people, Christians. Let's vote on those lines. Religious leaders, let's vote on those lines. Look, this man, we think that the way he behaves, he will be a very good leader. And for that matter, we call on Christians, we call on Muslims, vote for this person. And if we vote for this person, we think he will send us to the promised land. But if we decide to do it tribal, even if I'm not worth it, because I am this tribe.
Yeah, country person.
You have to vote for me.
Regional person.
You have to vote for me. Person. Then when the rippling effects are coming, then you begin to cry. It doesn't really make sense.